Okay, hello, my name is Mike Groves and I want to talk about transnational education as a shared space, pushes, pulls and shared identities. I work at the Centre for Academic English Studies at the Surrey International Institute at Dongbei University of Finance and Economics. This is a joint educational venture between the University of Surrey and Dongbei University of Finance and Economics, also known as DUFI. So in this presentation, I'm going to introduce the Surrey International Institute and its goals. I'm going to think about the Centre for Academic English Studies and where it fits between the two universities. I'm going to introduce some of the key challenges that I think we have, and I'm going to draw a comparison with an idea from Adrian Holliday that I think tells us a lot about this kind of operation and things we can learn from it. Now, I do have to say that this is not a data-led presentation. I've been working here now for just over 2 years, and this is going to be based on my own personal experience. So the Surrey International Institute is a joint educational initiative between the University of Surrey in the UK and Dongbei University of Finance and Economics in northeast China in Dalian. It was founded in 2007 and it offers 3 undergraduate degrees: International Business Management, Accounting and Finance and Tourism. It's a 1+3 model. So the first year, which I'm responsible for, is a preparatory year focused mostly on English for academic purposes, and then the students study another 3 years of undergraduate modules. There's approximately 360-370 students per intake per year, and while the preparatory year is not taught in the UK, the undergraduate modules are taught in parallel in China and the UK. Then they report through the same registry, the same exam boards, and they follow the same syllabus and curriculum. Before COVID, we had an intercampus mobility of about 10%. So 10% of the students will go and study for 1 or 2 years on the UK campus. So within the Surrey International Institute, we have the Centre for Academic English Studies, of which I am the director. Now this is a preparatory year, so it's the first year of the 1+3, and it's EAP focused. We have modules on speaking, writing, reading and English for specific purposes, English for management. It's a little bit tricky to give an easy characterization of the students' language levels when they come in, because they come in via Gaokao rather than via a CEFR benchmarked assessment. But I think it's reasonable to say that they come in on average at about B1, and we need them to leave us at a level of B2. The assessment is mostly coursework based, and they do of course have to do other modules which are mandated by the university and by the government, for example Chinese society, Chinese history. Now, in terms of where the modules of the Centre for Academic English of the preparatory year fit, it's fairly complex. So the University of Surrey did the original curriculum design. I, as director, am employed by Surrey, and I have informal reporting lines, approval lines back into the UK campus. It's important to note that there is no equivalent programme in the UK, so we are running our modules and we're not exactly taking a lead from the UK. They have their summer pre-sessional, but they don't. But that's not connected to us. We use the Surrey virtual learning environment, and I see a big part of my job as trying to set the direction for teaching and learning, and also for assessment. Now, DUFI, the modules are owned by the DUFI registry, whereas the undergraduate modules are run through the Surrey registry. Our modules are DUFI owned, so they look after things like quality assurance. We report into their exam boards. The teachers, well, I as director am employed by Surrey. The teachers are employed locally, so that means that all human resources issues are dealt with locally, as are things like timetabling, registry, all of the local IT systems that we have to deal with. So we use the Surrey virtual learning environment, but then we have to enter all our marks into the DUFI system. And as a more sort of complex, nebulous thing, I would say that the philosophy of teaching and learning, the philosophy of assessment is different. Now, I'm not trying to make a judgment here, I'm not trying to say better or worse, but there is a difference in how the role of assessment and how the role of teaching and learning can be best exploited, and is very much rooted in the Chinese traditions and the Chinese philosophy, and that's something I'm going to come on to in a minute. So let's think now about the challenges. I'm not going to be talking about COVID. That's given us a whole other layer of difficulty to deal with, and it's ongoing in China. And I'm not trying to present this with any sense of judgment at all. This is simply how I see the things that we need to deal with, and I'm not trying to suggest that the one way of doing things is necessarily better or worse than the other. Now, the first big challenge is pedagogic, and chief among these is probably students' focus on assessment. Now, it's quite important to recognise that many of our students are aspiring to do postgraduate study in some of the elite Chinese universities, and this is an extremely competitive admissions process, which takes into account their grades in their foundation year. This means that a few marks here or there now could conceivably have life-changing impact for the students 3 or 4 years down the line. So the students are extremely focused on their grades, and they're very, very focused on ensuring that their marking is treated consistently and fairly. There's also a challenge of oracy and literacy. And this is, I think, different from a similar cohort of students studying outside the UK, or studying outside China. So, for example, on a pre-sessional program or a foundation program in the UK, students would be mixing to some extent with students from other countries. In their everyday life, they would have to develop oral skills just to get through the week. This is very different. The students are only in an English-speaking environment in their classes, which means that their oracy doesn't develop as quickly as you might be used to if you're used to teaching in the UK. In addition, the literacy of students takes a bit more time to develop as well. And I suspect, again, this is due to the context, that they are on a Chinese campus. They haven't gone through the process of upping sticks and moving to another country. And this, I think, can affect the students' expectations of what happens in the classroom. They might not be fully expectant of a completely different style of teaching and learning. And this can, I think, lead to some academic shock. We also have structural challenges. The QA processes, for example. The HR systems can be a challenge because within HR, the processes of promotion and reward are different, and actually different between different teachers on our teaching team. And then we have some operational challenges. The biggest one, I think, is staff turnover. EAP in China does tend to have a higher staff turnover than in the UK. So we're constantly recruiting for new members of staff. And also the disconnect between the IT systems is also can be quite difficult, especially if we're running online exams. And at the end of term, we need to enter our grades into a Chinese database, which, as you can imagine, if you don't read Chinese, can be difficult. Now, I'd like to think now about the culture of the centre, because while some of these challenges are ongoing, others have relatively easy fixes. The culture of the centre is something that is, I think, absolutely key. And I'm talking about, small cultures here. I'm talking about the way that we work within the centre. And since culture is such a big word, I think it's useful to have a definition. And my go-to definition for culture is Spencer Otis. And I think some of the key words here are fuzzy. It's not clear-cut. Conventions. These are rules, not things that we always do. And understanding the meaning of each other's behaviour. I'd just like to bear that definition in mind, because then I'd like to take a slightly left turn now and talk about the tale of Francois and Agnes. This comes from Adrian Holliday, and it's about a holiday. Now, he talks about Francois and Agnes. Agnes is an American. Francois is a North African. And Agnes goes on holiday to Francois's home country. And she moves out of her general home culture into the tourist culture, the Birkenstocks, the water bottle, the guidebook. Francois works within the tourist industry, so he moves out of his family life, for example, and moves into the tourist culture of selling souvenirs and showing people around. And Francois and Agnes, they like each other very much, and they create a shared space between them, and they start a brief intimate relationship. And for a while, it's all very nice and it's all very lovely, but then it goes a little bit wrong. And once it starts to go wrong, the two start treating each other quite poorly. They start blaming each other. They start essentializing each other. In other words, they say, these Americans, they're all the same. These North Africans, they're all the same. They start othering each other. They start talking about the things that make them different, not make them similar. And it's a sad but probably quite common tale where they didn't manage their shared space. And I think we can extend this idea to institutes like joint education institutes. So how do we link this? What are the parallels between Agnes and Francois and a joint education institute? Well, I think the first thing we can think of is that the Chinese culture, UK culture, Anglophone culture are perhaps more interlinked than this diagram would suggest, but I think it's fair to say we're coming from separate places. And we extend these out into higher education, and the Chinese higher education, the UK higher education, again, are they're subsets, and they are linked perhaps in a way, but again are quite separate. And then the bridge between them, that shared space in the middle, is the Joint Educational Institute. And just as Agnes and Francois, their shared space could be very good, could be very warm, very nourishing, it's also very, very vulnerable to exactly the same forces of culturalism, of essentialism, of othering that in the end turned their shared space into a negative space. And I think it's an important thing to think about to ensure that the shared space is the type of space we want it to be. So for me, the shared space of a joint educational venture is potentially a very rich environment. It's got the potential to be a very exciting place to teach and to study, and it's got the potential to help international understanding. but it's a space that needs nurturing. It's a space that cannot be taken for granted. And for that, my view is that we need constant communication and constant negotiation of meaning and intent to maintain the positivity of the shared space that we're in. Thank you very much for listening.